Make sure everything is unmuted. Hey, everyone. Final Cut Pro Radio TV Live. And my guest today, let me see if I can point to the right direction. Terry Morgan and Chris Damaris from Luma-Touch. We're going to talk specifically about the new version of LumaFusion that just came out, right? 2.2?
That's right. Just came out yesterday.
Just came out yesterday.
Thanks for having us, Richard. Yeah.
Hot off the press. Absolutely. It's my pleasure. But we're specifically going to be talking a lot about Final Cut Pro XML export from LumaFusion because everybody's excited about that, including myself.
We're very excited about it too.
We've been working on this feature for a long time, and we spent a lot of time making sure that we got a lot of the details right. When you're working with FCPXML, there's a lot of differences between different kinds of timelines, and FCP does things in very different ways, and so we had to make sure that everything worked. And we created some really fun workflows to make it really easy to move back, to move from LumaFusion to Final Cut in ways that normal apps won't do. And so we put a lot of time into that.
So you mentioned, before we get into the FCPXML export, you mentioned that your team is growing. You guys have got some new people, and you're going to, what's going on there?
Well, we've built up both sides of our team, both the, design and support and marketing. And, for my side, most importantly, the engineering team has grown quite a bit. And that's going to allow us moving forward to really do more parallel development of the features that customers have been asking for a while that, we just want as free updates like we always do, as well as doing these bigger features like FCPXML, where we can really grow the platform and do more workflows that haven't been possible on mobile before. And so this really helps us streamline that and be able to do more quickly for customers.
Right. That's fantastic. So I saw you all last at the FCPX Creative Summit.
We had a lot of fun there.
How was that? Yeah. That was good for LumaFusion?
Definitely. We made some great contacts there, met a lot of great people, and just learned a lot. I mean, we saw Justine and heard all about her workflow. Sam Mestman heard about his workflow and all the great things he's doing. And just a lot of great speakers were there, and it was good.
And you sold a copy. You sold a copy of LumaFusion to Mike Yanovich. He kept going back and forth. I want to buy this. I don't need it, but I want to buy it. He's been on the show before. He's a 27-year Avid editor that switched to Final Cut Pro.
Wow.
In Hollywood.
Yeah.
In Hollywood. I always tease him when he's on the show. I asked him, because he said there's other Final Cut Pro editors in Hollywood, but they're not. They're kind of little secretive about it. I asked him if they had a secret Final Cut Pro cabal, and he said they actually do. They actually have a secret group that they get together and stuff. So that was rather funny. Yeah, so you sold him a copy. He was the biggest, hardest sell. You can sell him a copy. You can sell anybody a copy.
That's right.
So yeah, that was a good summit this time. We had lots of people there. So when I was fooling around with LumaFusion, I've been working with it over the last couple of months, but specifically today, I was trying to connect an external drive.
Right. So there's some interesting, facts about it, adding external drives. If you're using one of the new iPad Pros that has a USB-C connector, then it's a really easy option. Virtually any USB-C drive will work without power, things like the Samsung T5. There's a really cool new drive from Samsung called the T7 coming out that actually has Touch ID on it, plus SSD storage. But just about any drive will work. Now, if you're on a regular iPad with a Lightning adapter, it's a little more complicated. If you want to hook up a USB drive, you'll almost always have to have additional power for it. So, for example, you can use the digital AV adapter. That has a Lightning connector, an HDMI connector, and an additional USB port on it. And so from that, you can hook up the power through Lightning and hook up your USB drive and still be able to use it. Now, it won't be as fast as the USB-C on the iPad Pro, but it's at least functional. Another nice option is SanDisk has the iExpand flash drives, and these have both a Lightning connector and a USB connector on them. And so with those, you can hook it up, and we've built in a complete workflow where you can import and export to those drives, and then you can also connect it up on your Mac and be able to get the media that way as well.
Right. So I do have one of those drives with the USB-C and the USB-A on it. I haven't tried that one yet, but that was what I was looking for right before we started here. So the other thing, so you can use Dropbox, which I've been doing in the past, but you also use, I have my iPhone 11 Pro Max that has 512 gigabytes of storage on it. So this is typically what I film with, is this. Yeah. So now I can use this with AirDrop to that.
Yes.
To that as well. That's another way.
Great work.
Absolutely right. Yep.
Now,
AirDrop's a great way to get media running.
Right. One of the things that I noticed today is LumaFusion support H.265?
It does, yes. You can both import and export H.265. Now, H.265 export will only work on more modern iPads, but that's anything, I think, from 6th generation on up. It'll support H.265 export. And so, yeah, you basically get better quality at a lower bit rate on there, and it's really quite nice.
So the reason I asked was one of the files that I brought over, it had a warning on it that it might be incompatible and it might cause something to crash. And I wasn't sure what was that file was.
Okay, so the warning, sometimes what will happen is, depending on how it was encoded, Apple's frameworks will say that it's not quite playable.
Okay.
In 99% of the cases, that'll work fine in LumaFusion. We just put that warning there just to let you know that if you do start to see some problems with it, that it might be because of that media. And we have ways to fix that. For example, if you have something start to happen, you can run an optimize on the project, which will just re-encode the media in a way, usually just the timing of it, so that it usually resolves those kind of problems as well.
So I was wondering if that was a H.265 issue, because I was kind of surprised because it came from the phone, but here's the other problem. Sometimes I record natively, sometimes I use Filmic Pro, sometimes I use Mavis, and I don't know. Right. I don't know what. I think the native app right now is set to H.265. I'm pretty sure it is. Because
it should always come across correctly. We have had a few cases where some Filmic clips have come across with that warning because they encode at a higher bit rate, and so sometimes Apple just puts a warning on it. But generally, we found those clips work really well within the app.
So that's great. So that's what I typically use these days. I know the computer doesn't like it, but hey, look, I got a Mac Pro. I got to make it work somehow, right? It's right here on the desk. It's completely silent. It's just completely silent. It is hot though. Does throw heat off which is good in the wintertime, but in the summertime, I'm not going to like it as much, yeah. I mean, the thing is just incredible. It's just absolutely incredible, silent. There's been a couple little quirky things that I've noticed with it. For example, the camera that I'm using, which is a GH4, it's connected via HDMI out to a CamLink converter that takes HDMI to USB. For some reason, I have problems connecting that to the USB port on the Mac Pro, so I do a USB to Thunderbolt 3 conversion cable, and that works fine. But the other one, I had to go back and forth, click things on and off. I didn't know what it was, but apparently it's something in the Mac Pro, because I didn't have a problem in the iMac Pro.
Hopefully they'll have an update to fix that one. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm sure those things will be ironed out, yeah.
Exactly. So one of the other things, before we get to the big thing, which is FCPX export, is you guys have teamed up with Photo Joseph?
Right, yes. He has been a friend of ours for a while, as we've worked with him on other smaller projects, but I thought he was a perfect person to explain how to use LumaFusion. He's a big user of it, and he is very eloquent and additionally just a really nice guy, so we thought it would be a great person to contract with to update all our tutorials. So he's done, I think, 22, and there's 60 in total that will be coming out as he finishes them.
So 60, he's going to do that many more.
Yeah.
One of the things that I posted on Twitter a couple weeks ago when I first saw that he had those videos out, and they coincide with the chapters in your manual. And I absolutely love that. I call it the gold standard of training. You have the written manual, and then you have the video tutorial that matches the written manual, go one by one by one. Now, the question I have for Photo Joseph is he going to bring that red chair to NAB? I want to sit in that chair.
That would be great. Yeah, that's a great chair.
It is.
And he's got a special outfit even that he wears every time he sits in there for LumaTouch, so it's pretty fun.
Yeah, he has to glue the chair down in a certain position, leave the lights in the place so nothing changes.
Yeah.
So speaking of NAB, I'm sure you're coming to NAB, right?
Yep.
So
We'll be there.
But this 2.2 update's gigantic. Does that mean there's going to be something else at NAB, perhaps?
We'll probably have something to show at NAB. Nothing we're ready to quite talk about yet, but but we definitely will have new things to show there as well. And for those people who haven't yet seen it, we'll definitely show the FCPXML workflow there also.
So let's talk about that, because that's what people are really, really excited about. So the workflow is you do your editing in LumaFusion, including titles, audio adjustments, etc. And when you're done, if you want to take it to Final Cut Pro, which I'm going to talk about after we get done this initial conversation, if you want to take it to Final Cut Pro, you can now export an XML and then import the XML to Final Cut Pro.
That's exactly correct. And so from LumaFusion, we've really made that an easy process. When you go to export, we've always had the ability to obviously export a movie, export a project package for backup and restore, and now there's a new item called XML archive or XML package. And what that basically does is create the XML that's needed, along with any media that's needed to go across, and puts it in a zip file that you simply unzip on your Mac and double click on the FCPXML file, and it opens up immediately into Final Cut. And we give you some options of how you export that as well. So you can export all of the media from the timeline, or you can export what we call just the what we call non-relinkable media. So what you can do is, let's say most of your media is coming from that external drive that you've been editing with. Well, you can basically say, don't export with that relinkable media. It'll create a really small, quick FCPXML file, and you plug that same drive into your Mac, open up the FCPXML, and that media just appears on your timeline in Final Cut. And we do the same thing with Dropbox and a number of other sources, Narbox and others, that makes it really easy to work with your media and always get back to your original media when you're working with Final Cut. And we make it as painless as possible.
Well, you add an option in there. You have a trimmed media option, which takes 2 seconds on each side of the clip.
That's another way we can save space. And, just because in a lot of cases you're going to be using this workflow where you've done most of your edit in LumaFusion and you just need to either, maybe do some audio sweetening or some effects, that can only be done in Final Cut, and you don't want all that media going across. And so we keep the file small and get that across with just what you need. And
so we're going to go over, there's some things, most everything comes across to Final Cut, but there's a couple of things, because this is one of the things I want to talk about. LumaFusion has things that Final Cut Pro does not have. And therefore, those things don't translate. But you have workarounds, like, for example, for the titles, they come across as transparent PNGs? That's correct. For now, those do. Now, some of these features that we don't currently support, we will add more capabilities in the future. We fully intend with titles to actually bring across a full editable title in the future. Things like certain effects will come across and color corrections. Right now we've kept it straightforward to edits, and some of the effects like, motions, positioning, rotation, animations, fades all come across quite nicely. And so we've done as much as we can in a clean state. Now, like you said, we support things that Final Cut doesn't. For example, we allow you to add transitions to the beginning and end of any clip in the timeline, where Final Cut only allows you at the beginning and end of the main track on the timeline. And so for now, if you have those in the timeline, those won't transfer across. But in the future, we intend to do that by supporting compound clips, the way you would have to do it in Final Cut. So right now, you'll get a really good clean edit across, and in the future, we'll have more, free updates to that feature that will allow you to do more and more as we move along. So I'm going to show this one timeline. I got a phone call there. This one timeline I took from Photo Joseph's video showing, so the top, you can't see this, but the audience can. So the top is Final Cut Pro, and the bottom is what was exported from LumaFusion. And they look just about identical. It's amazing that the transition, the XML transition, is that accurate, even with the features that Final Cut Pro does not have.
Right. And that was a lot of work to do that. Things like, the way Apple handles timecode meant that we had to really learn a lot about how to get timecode right from different, clips, because people were getting media from so many different sources and in so many different ways. And so we spent a lot of our time making sure that a wide variety of projects would translate correctly.
So tell me about that. How does Final Cut handle timecode differently than maybe you expected or other NLEs do?
Well, for example, internally in our app, we do all of our time offset from 0 for the media itself. Timecode isn't really taken into account for the actual edit. We can still display it, you can still use it, things like that. But Final Cut Pro's XML, that timecode is built into every edit. So if you have something with timecode, something linked to that, then that's offset from that timecode, and so everything has to be relative to that timecode. And most importantly, if we're going to relink to the original media, if we don't have that timecode, those values exactly right, then it won't relink properly to the original media.
I see.
So that's a lot of time spent to make that work perfectly.
One of the things, the FAQs that I saw, again, I think it was Photo Joseph's video. He has a video talking about the XML, and he shows how it works and everything. Is if you're going to, if you're planning on exporting to Final Cut Pro, do not use the iOS Photos app.
Right. Because if you want to relink the media, now if you're just getting media that you want to send across, that's fine. You can do that. But the problem is that ironically, Apple doesn't have a way for us to relink to the same media on the Mac in Photos as we do on iOS. There's no global identifier that links those two together, and so in that case, there's no way for us to relink back to that original media.
That's interesting that happens because I would have just thought I'm put it in the Photos and grab it from there, but it doesn't work.
We would have hoped for that too.
Yeah. But if you include your media in your export, it'll be fine. It's just if you're going to do the relinking workflow.
The relinking. So how does the relinking work if I want to do that? So I export the XML, import it into Final Cut. Everything's offline. All the media's offline.
Well, it depends. Now, for a lot of workflows, for example, let's say you're using Dropbox like you are. If you're using the same Dropbox account on iOS and you have that set up, if you have Dropbox set up on your Mac, right, then most times what will happen is as soon as you open that project, FCP will automatically download those Dropbox files and they'll just show up online immediately.
Okay.
Because we use, when we send it across as relinkable, we use paths that will automatically find their way into your Dropbox,
sure,
path so that you can find the media. Now, if that doesn't work, then it'll show up offline and you'll have to do the relink files.
Right.
And there are some cases where you'll have to do that. But we've worked really hard that in most cases, if you follow the workflows we have on our facts on our website, it will just open up with all your media ready to work with. And it's a really fun and exciting workflow, actually.
So which one of you two is responsible for this, for the XML coding?
I don't know who came up with the idea, actually, but we got so many requests for it before we started working on it. And I think that we have a segment of our users that use LumaFusion solely and probably don't see why we would want to have this XML to Final Cut feature. But there are people that want to use LumaFusion strategically in a bigger workflow and just haven't been able to because they know they need to finish on Final Cut. And so for those people, we got a lot of requests for this, but it's a very technical feature. So from a design standpoint, there wasn't much for me to say except I want it to work.
Right.
It was mostly engineering.
Exactly.
I had to do a little bit, but mostly just engineering and saying I really think we need to relink things or stuff like that. But it's Chris's baby.
Well, it's here at this office, I had a part in it. Actually, one of the other Chris's here, we have a Chris Morrissey here, who's another engineer. He was a really big part of the development of the FCP XML feature. And it was a team effort. QA was a huge part of this too, constantly coming back. Well, sometimes it was irritating, but, they constantly thought we'd fix something and said, well, that worked, but this didn't work.
Right, software, yeah.
And we had some great beta testers as well. We had a beta test group that, had different workflows and came back to us with a lot of feedback on how we could improve things and things that worked and didn't. And so that really drove how we built this feature.
So that's one of the things I was going to talk about. If I'm going to edit in LumaFusion, personally I'm not going to take it out to Final Cut Pro. I'm going to leave it in LumaFusion for the most part. The only time that I would use the export feature is if I was traveling on a train from here to New York and I had hours and I wanted to do a rough cut that I wanted to take into Final Cut later. But if I'm spending time in LumaFusion and I'm adding titles and I'm doing audio ducking and I'm doing all these other things, I'm leaving it in LumaFusion, to be honest with you. I'm not going to export it.
Yeah, I mean, there's that aspect to it for sure. And I think that editing on LumaFusion is a completely different experience than editing on Final Cut. So for people that already know LumaFusion, it's like, yeah, I actually could just finish here and I don't need to go there. But there are a lot of people that need to do stuff for stations and so on.
Yeah, there's also professional movie workflows where they have to use Final Cut, but they could maybe now do daily edits on LumaFusion, for example, and have more fun with that, but still get across to. So I think what we're trying to do is open it up to people who are a little more reticent to, edit entirely on mobile, and give them a starting place. And hopefully they'll find that, after a few edits, hey, I can just stay on LumaFusion. But if they don't, they always have the option to, to finish on Final Cut.
No, I definitely like the feature. I mean, having the feature that I can go to Final Cut is fantastic. Now, that's a add-on from the app?
That's correct. Right. It's a one-time in-app purchase for $19.99, and but it's a one-time, and once you bought it, you have it for life. So, and we will do free updates with new features and fixes to that in the future.
So, is the XML that you export, is that a pure Final Cut Pro XML, or is there something different about it?
It is pure Final Cut XML. It's based on their current standard, which is the 1.8 Final Cut Pro XML standard. So it is pure and following all of their rules and standards.
Okay, well, then the next question is, there's other NLEs that use Final Cut Pro XML to get Final Cut Pro projects like Resolve. I think, I don't know if Premiere does or not directly.
Use the Final Cut Pro 7 version of it.
Right. Do a translation. There are to try it on those. I just wouldn't, guarantee it at this point. But it's something, maybe in the future we'll spend some time on. Right now we see that for the near future, we're going to continue refining the Final Cut Pro experience and making sure that everything we can get across will go across perfectly before we look forward to any other editors.
Well, the Final Cut Pro community thanks you for that. It's my audience. They like it when you do things specifically for Final Cut Pro.
Yeah.
So let me just see here. So one of the things, this is an it says see FAQ for tutorial for additional information, and this is on the XML settings export, and I really like the fact that you can use trimmed media, which is automatically gives you 2 seconds on each side. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
And there's you have a whole list of FAQ information about the export specifically, but one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was story blocks for LumaFusion. That's something that's fantastic. So people can use those without any fee?
The story blocks feature is a subscription in app,
subscription.
That's not. We have some free clips in there. There's about 30 or 40 free clips in there that you can just use without any fee whatsoever. But for the full library access, it is a subscription in the app for the story blocks library. But it's a great library of royalty-free media so that you can use it in any of your projects and find exactly what you want for both video and audio to finish off your projects. And those clips will transfer across to Final Cut as well. Those will just be added to the pack.
So even if you did the relinking workflow, so you're planning on relinking media, any media that we know you can't relink, we would automatically include anyway. So when it says no relinkable media, we're not transferring anything that should be relinkable outside the app, but things like story blocks, things from the Photos app, titles, any media generated in LumaFusion would be included in the package.
Exactly. So you guys have, first off, once again, I want want to commend you for all your training that you have. You have the manual, then you have all the Photo Joseph videos that go with the manual. Let me just pull up these. There's a couple of questions that I wanted to talk about. Because how do I get my external drive to show up in the iOS files? So I forgot that the iPad Pro has a USB-C port, not a Lightning port.
Right.
And that makes the difference.
That's correct. Yeah, it makes a big difference, and allows us a more integrated workflow where that media can just show up in our library, and you can just drag and drop it directly to the timeline, and it makes for a really nice workflow, and it's quite fast.
So we just got a comment that says, "Hi everybody, I'm a really basic user of LumaFusion. May I ask a specific feature, not strictly video related?" You can ask. Go ahead.
Yeah, why not?
Go ahead and ask. We'll see if there's going to be any comment on it. I tried to get them to talk about what's going on at NAB. They wouldn't tell me, so that's...
We do have stuff coming for NAB that should be pretty exciting, but we're keeping it under wraps until then.
Sure, absolutely. So are you going to be in the same area? Do you know where you're going to be at NAB?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in Central Hall, and we're doing the same sort of mobile editor, pavilion there, and we've added one more company, which is ShoulderPod, will be joining us in that.
So we've got Filmic, ShoulderPod, Rhino, Narbox, and LumaTouch all in a row there.
Right.
Showing various workflows.
I dropped by there last year and talked to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So
we'll also be doing some stuff at the Frame.io booth as well. We're sort of working with them and Narbox in sort of some workflows there that are interesting. And so, we'll be around.
And Frame.io is also in the same spot they were last year. I was talking to Patrick Southern. He said they're going to be in the same spot, which is right around the corner from Blackmagic.
That's right.
Yeah.
And apparently, I didn't know this because I didn't go to NAB in those days, Blackmagic took over the spot that Apple used to have.
Oh.
Apple used to have that spot when you first walk in the bottom of the South Hall. And then Apple stopped. Of course, they stopped doing trade shows when Steve Jobs was around. Yeah. Steve Jobs said it's just not worth it.
Yeah. Photo Joseph will be at our booth or at the Frame.io booth as well. So if you're interested in talking to him or meeting him, that's where he'll be.
We got another question from Eric Emmerich. How much of what you plan to do is dependent on assumed increase in power of future iPads?
We never depend on future feature. We always assume that Apple's going to increase it. But, I actually work here, for example. All my testing is on an iPad 5th generation, which is a fairly old one relative to, I think it's a 2016 or 2015 model. And, so that I make sure that it's at least everything we do is functional on older models as well. And so that's sort of our goal, is that anything we do should be functional on most reasonably, modern iPads. Of course, we look forward and want to take advantage of the new power that comes about. And that's been something we've done all the way along with supporting more feature, more higher resolution and more tracks and things like that. We'll always look at what's new. And sometimes even Apple comes to us to show us what's coming up and what's new. And so we can take advantage of it, like the FCPX, capabilities. We're always looking to see how we can improve those workflows for users with whatever Apple will provide in the future.
So the question, new rant, whoever that is, sounds like a made-up name, but he says, I'd like to simply pull stills from those H.265 files that are coming out, example for the GH5 6K photo. So I guess they mean pull stills from LumaFusion?
Yeah. And you can do that if you put them on a timeline.
You can do snapshots. Now, 6K, you won't get a 6K out at the moment. Users have told us that 6K media is working coming into LumaFusion, but currently we only support a 4K export, and so even the snapshots will only be 4K coming out of there. Oh,
okay. Well, there's a limitation. Well, it's not that much of a limitation. He mentioned the GH5. The GH5 shoots 5K internally right now. And then if you have an anamorphic lens, you can stretch it to 6K. But I think he's just talking, he says 6K photos, so that's what I think he's talking about. So the limit right now comes out as 4K.
That's correct, yeah.
What's the latest iPad that's available? I don't even know.
Yeah, so at the base model, there's, the 2000, I think it's the 2019 iPad model, which is a really nice basic iPad. One that I really highly recommend is the iPad Air. You get a little more power, a little more capability, but still a low cost, more storage. So you can do a 256 gigabyte iPad Air. That's a really nice model for a really low price. And then if you want the top of the line, the iPad Pros, the 11-inch and the 12.9-inch are the most powerful iPads.
Right. Yeah, I have an Air 2, iPad Air 2. I remember.
Okay,
yeah. And it runs fine.
The Air 3 really ups the game as far as power and capability.
So I'm looking forward. The more I work with LumaFusion, I'm looking forward to getting it, trading in my MacBook Pro and just getting an iPad Pro, I think. So the keyboards. I saw somebody on YouTube. I was looking at how to connect, a Bluetooth keyboard to the iPad, and it looks pretty simple. But somebody on YouTube put it on their MacBook Pro and somehow used the MacBook Pro keyboard. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not. No,
they actually, it might be an older version of the OS, but they actually set up the iPad. It leaned on the screen. It took the place of the screen, and somehow they linked the MacBook Pro keyboard to the iPad. I thought, wow.
Yeah. Oh, but that brings up a good point. One of the things that we changed in this version was that we changed all the keyboard shortcuts. And the reason we did that is because we've redesigned the whole layout of all the shortcuts so that we can have a keyboard overlay that's being made by editor's keys. And it's a very thin film that goes over your smart keyboard and has all the keyboard shortcuts on there, and it's all color coded so you know whether to hit Option or Command or Shift or so on. And it really is super cool and gets you to use those keyboard shortcuts that we support.
So we just got a comment. Is there a list of the keyboard shortcuts? I think there's an overlay that pops up, right?
Exactly.
There is an overlay.
If you hold down the Command key on the keyboard for a moment, all the keyboard shortcuts will show up. Now, one thing people sometimes miss is there's multiple pages of them. So when the pop-up shows up, you need to swipe across to see all of the keyboard shortcuts. And then we also have them listed in the manual, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, but this keyboard shortcut overlay for your smart keyboard is just fantastic, and it'll sit right on there. And you can even close your iPad case with it on there. It's very thin. It's super nice.
So there was a comment on Twitter. It said, "Dear LumaTouch, thanks for that FCP export capability. That being said, are we in track to support timecode clip syncing?" I'm not exactly sure. That's what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to.
Well, I mean, yeah. Yes, we will address that.
In an upcoming update, that's something I can say. That's something we're working on.
Yeah,
for sure.
Another comment, which we've talked about before: if Apple bought out LumaFusion, here's the problem with that. We talked about it before, and you said you consider the offer, but there's no you like what you're doing, so you might not take it. Here's one of the problems: if they bought out LumaFusion and tried to do like Final Cut Pro on the iPad, one of two scenarios would happen. Either they would add the features that they don't have, that LumaFusion has, to Final Cut Pro, or they take the features out of LumaFusion that Final Cut Pro doesn't have. And I don't think they do this first one. I think they do the second one. So I like it just the way it is.
Yeah, we're really happy doing what we're doing. We like the team that we have. We like the way that we work. And so, at this point, we like being independent, and we work really closely with Apple. In fact, even on FCPXML, they gave us contact with, with the engineer who was responsible for FCPXML, and we were able to ask him questions and do it. So, we have a great relationship with Apple, and that's the way we like it. But we like our independence, so we can bring out the features we want when we want them. We're not quite as tight-lipped as Apple about what we're working on.
Sure.
We can only do that because we're not Apple, of course. So
right.
That's one of the advantages we have.
Well, I've talked about this on my show before. Apple is selective about managing expectations of what's coming out. Like, for example, the Mac Pro last year. It was announced WWDC. They made another announcement in the fall. They made another announcement. It's going to be out December. They pre-announced the version of Final Cut Pro coming out. But since then, it's been like zip as far as Final Cut Pro. There's been any information coming out whatsoever. So they're selective on when they want to manage expectations. They do it sometimes, sometimes they don't.
Yep.
So when you're using the keyboard, the Bluetooth keyboard, because that's what I'd be interested in doing if I got a iPad Pro or another version of the iPad. Can you use keyboard shortcuts with LumaFusion?
Sure.
I mean, like JK&L?
Yep, JKL, IO, everything you can do, shortcuts to get to any of the editors. We have a whole bunch of shortcuts, trim head and trim tail of clips, just about everything you can imagine to do, quick editing. So if you can get good at the keyboard, you can edit quite fast. I mean, I edit pretty fast with the touch, but some people are even faster with keyboards.
Well, I like the combination of the both. I like the combination of, I'd love for Apple to have a touch screen MacBook Pro. That doesn't mean you use it all the time. People say, I don't want to reach my hand over. You don't have to use it all the time, but sometimes it would be nice to have. And I guarantee you they have one working at the campus somewhere. They've been working on it for years since the iPad came out. And at some point they'll have one. But like, for example, I don't know how many times this has happened to me. I'm playing I'm using my iPad and I'm touching things. And I go to my MacBook Pro and I keep touching the screen to get QuickTime to play. I said, what is wrong with this? It's not playing. I'm just, touching it.
Yeah.
My 6-year-old does that too.
Exactly. Well, they're used to it. The young people are used to everything touch.
Now, why doesn't it work?
Yeah, this thing has made the biggest difference in the quality of video coming out of these phones, the one that came out last year. That's the reason I bought this. Before that, I had a 6S Plus, I think. I've had all these years, and I just bought that one because I had 4K video. This one, tremendous the quality of video is fantastic. Audio is still an issue. I'm actually gonna do a live tutorial on the different audio options that I've had, getting good audio into this thing, because man, there's a lot of options and a lot of different microphones and things. I'm actually going to do one of those because people ask about that all the time. Like when I was talking to you, I have a wireless system that I have set up. It's not made for the iPhone. It's made for DSLRs, but I've adapted it to the iPhone, and it works really, really well. Plus, they have lapels, and they have the new Go. It's the Rode Go, Wireless Go, that I really, really like a lot for me talking, and then having a forward-facing mic when I'm interviewing somebody. I can have my mic here, forward-facing mic to somebody else, and that's, you got to keep those two separate. There's something you can do that would keep those two separate tracks. So you can adjust them differently. So, I mean,
that's why we had added that feature to send the channel left and the channel mapping to send channel left and right because of people doing reporting like you.
Right. So when I do, like you'll see me at NAB, I have two main setups. Sometimes I'm behind the camera talking to somebody in front of the camera. In that case, I use the Rode Go for me, and what I do, I actually put it inside my shirt. So I don't need a windscreen. I have a lanyard around my neck, and it's right inside my shirt, right below my first button, and it's invisible, but it works really, really well for picking up me. And then I have a medium shotgun for the front person, so both of us can talk and be heard. But when I'm interviewing somebody, which is a lot of times, I got to set it up on a tripod, and then I come up and interview people, because sometimes people like that better, and plus I do as well. And then I have a wireless system that's made for a DSLR. So let me see what there's a couple more questions. I'm getting an Apple XDR display soon. Can I connect an iPad Pro to use LumaFusion?
Well, you can connect a iPad Pro to the XDR display. I don't know at this point if you'll get full HDR
right
output on that, but you can preview your video there, and it would certainly look beautiful on that monitor, I'm sure.
Yes. And we got another comment. Definitely a trailblazing app for you guys.
Thanks.
That's from Fred. Fred Rhodes III. He comes on these all the time and talks. It absolutely is. I tell people about it all the time. I said, people constantly like, when's Final Cut Pro coming to the iPad? I said, it's already there. I said, it's better. It's better than what, it has more features than what Final Cut Pro has.
Yeah, I mean, I really, as an editor, I really like the way that we've done the timeline model. We have the magnetic timeline like Final Cut Pro X, and we also have some track-based editing like insert and overwrite, the ability to lock a track, mute a track. Just as an editor, I like that extra control that I can either track-based edit or use clip linking and the magnetic timeline, and I can turn that off and on per clip or per track, and it's perfect for me. I just love it, and I do think that it is like, it's my favorite editing model, even though it's ours. But it's really just, still. I am a little biased, but I do love it, and yeah, I mean, I just want to say, Chris and I are having the time of our life doing this. It's just the best job we've had. It's the best work we've done, and it's the best team that I've worked with in all my years. So we're really happy, and I appreciate that Fred said thank you.
Well, not only Fred, but listen. Final Cut Pro has some great features and it has some limitations. And I absolutely 100% agree with you. I'd like to be able to lock a track. I like the way that LumaFusion has a combination of both magnetic timeline and the track-based paradigm. I like that. You can use one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Or both. I mean,
or both. Yeah, both. Yeah, that's what I mean. Sorry.
Yeah.
So Eric Emmerich says third-party audio plugins. What's happening with the iPad and third-party audio?
So we do have a plan to bring those back in. For those who know, we actually had those capable way back, but they caused a lot of problems. We have actually brought a really good audio engineer on board. He's right now contracting with us, but may come on full time to really work on our audio pipeline, including bringing back third-party audio units and improving things like the UI for our audio filters and things like that. So that'll be coming. Don't have a time frame for that, but that is in the works right now.
Thank you for saying that, Chris. Yeah. Don't have a time frame for it, but he's working hard on it, and I'm hoping that our audio, the redesign and the reimagination of our audio lives up to the way we've done video after he's done.
So just basically, I don't understand. I've never been a software developer, but you have people that do the coding, and then you have, I think Terry does the design, the layout. What do you do, Chris? I'm not sure what you do.
I do the coding. I do a good portion of the coding. So the first 3 years, I was the only person doing the coding.
Okay.
And luckily, I have a nice team of 4 additional people who are doing a big part of it to help, because as we've grown and we get more feature requests, we just have so much to do that all of us are coding constantly to make these things work. So I code a lot. And
So Chris is the best engineer I've ever worked with, from just the way he's very open-minded to looking up things, to finding out. He's not about his own solution. He's about finding the best solution. And I think that shows in how he's integrated or used all the tools available that Apple has to keep our app really up to date and doing the very top performance. And I just really appreciate that about Chris. So our workflow is I make wireframes of first we decide what we're going to do.
Sure.
Then I make wireframes, mock-ups, make the icons, and we write stories based on what our users are telling us. Like, I want to be able to, export to XML so that I can continue to edit. So and then we order the stories and just start every 2 weeks. We take a number of those stories, and that's part of why we don't give due dates. Like, we don't say, we're going to have this out in September. We tried that, and the fact is we're going to get it out when it's done. And when we get through those stories, that's when it's done. And it would be nice to be able to predict that, but you just simply can't. I mean, you can put out a substandard product if you do that. So we have just moved to this kind of agile process where we do don't get it done. When we're done, we're done.
So let's talk about some of the other features in 2.2. The FCP XML was the biggest by far. That's been in the works. I think you talked about it last NAB when I was there.
Yes, we did. Yeah, we were hoping to release it last year, early in the spring. So that's, that tells you how long it took to get everything right.
Well, that's the main thing, to get it right. That's exactly correct. So what are some of the other features of 2.2, the new features?
that I really like is being able to organize your sources and destinations. When you go into, for example, when you pop up export movie and you have places like Dropbox and things like that, in the past it's become just one big long list of where you can export things. But now we allow you to actually organize it with just the ones you want, just the destinations and sources you want, and in whatever order you want. So, and you can do that differently for whether you're exporting a movie or exporting a project archive, so that your workflow is much cleaner than it used to be. That to me it makes a really big difference in not having to wade your way through things you don't use all the time. If you don't use OneDrive or if you don't use Google Drive, you don't have to see those anymore. And so in some sense, it's a small feature, but it's a big improvement in workflow. That's probably one of the other big UI features. What else do we have in there? We've done some improvements on story blocks as far as adding collections that they have available and some better organization there.
Keyboard shortcuts reorganization for the overlay that I was talking about.
And then beyond that, it's mostly a lot of small improvements to, UI and bug fixes and, performance improvements, things like that we've been working on along the way as we've been doing these other features.
We just got another comment from Nobby Dave. Good things. Some of these names.
We love him.
Good things come to those who wait. Great work.
Thanks. Thanks, Dave.
Nobby Dave's a really great guy. He actually moderates our forums for us. He's out of the UK, and he's a really nice guy. And he's been a friend of ours for a while now.
And my friend Charlie Austin, he did a nice video. He says, LumaTouch 2.2 XML import to Final Cut Pro is amazeballs. Side-by-side timelines, no tweaking, just open it up. He had it.
Saw his. I think he tweeted.
Yeah,
somewhere,
he tweeted that exactly.
Yeah.
And then iMore also covered you guys.
Yes. Yeah.
These are all
I
great.
think they're 9 to 5 Mac.
9 to 5 Mac. Yeah, all these people.
Wonderful.
So did you see that Parasite won 4 Oscars?
And it edited on Final Cut Pro 7.
It was 7. So when are you going to have Final Cut Pro 7 export? Now that that has come out, is viable again.
I mean, he maybe could have edited that on LumaFusion if he.
Well, exactly. That's right. LumaFusion is more powerful than 7 was, but 7 was great for its day. I really, really liked 7.
I edited on 7 for a long time, and I actually really loved it.
So that was amazing that when that won 4. I mean, I knew in advance it was nominated, and I didn't really expect it maybe to win 1, but it won 4. I mean, it beat out Martin Scorsese for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like a Hitchcock film. I mean, it's structured like that, and I watched half of it, and then my son came home, so I had to stop watching it. Right. And I was in the kitchen, like my palms were sweating, just like,
is that right?
What is going to happen? It's so good.
Yeah,
I think it's sort of Hitchcocky.
That's good. I like Hitchcock a lot, so I was going to watch it this weekend. I haven't seen it yet. But the other amazing thing about that is that it's a foreign language film that won the Oscar with subtitles. Yes. That's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice. Subtitles, and I have already spilled the beans on this one. So this is something that we have on our docket for this year, I believe. Right, Chris?
Yeah. It's working the whole subtitling workflow.
So is that going to be subtitling? Because there's different subtitles. There's the ones you turn on and off, and then there's the burn-in captions.
Right. So ours will be both. You'll have the option to burn in the subtitles or have them done as metadata, and we'll have ability to have localized subtitles as well, and so it can basically put the metadata in for all of the localizations, so they can be turned on and off as well.
So are you going to have any time to sleep?
Working on that.
No, I scheduled the year so he can get no sleep.
I was going to say. He's going to be tired by the time he gets to NAB, I guarantee.
Hey, that's probably.
Yeah. These 3 months are not going to be great, or 2 months actually, but no, we try to work at a really sustainable pace so that our whole team is happy, and
sure.
We have so much fun. So I hope that Chris isn't too burned out.
I love to work with this.
So one of the things with mobile journalism, which I've loved that for years. I've been filming with my iPhones for years, just because you always have it with you. Pull it out and you film it. Now with the new 11 Pro Max, it's this has become my main camera. I have a GH4 and GH5, but I take this with me everywhere, and I drop a microphone in, or I have a whole bunch of gizmos I use with it, different kind of sticks and tripods and stuff.
Have you tried the Double Take app yet?
Yes. Yes, I have. Yes, I have. So I've told Filmic Pro people the Double Take is really, really cool. When they get the final version in Filmic Pro, here's one feature that I really hope that they can incorporate. When I film with the native iPhone app, film with video, I can switch the lenses while I'm filming. So I can zoom out to a wide shot while I'm filming. I can zoom into the regular shot, and I can zoom into the telephoto while I'm filming. I've seen no other app that can do that. Every other app, you have to stop, select your lens, and then re-record again. Now, hopefully Apple didn't block developers from using that, because I love that feature. I do it all the time.
Does the Double Take not do that? Or?
No, you have to tap the lens.
And switch. Yeah, I mean, you can do the two lenses at a time, but you can't switch those lenses while you're recording. And
right.
I don't think there's anything in the APIs that would preclude. But to do both those things might be a fairly difficult process.
No, I don't need the Force 4 screen. I just talk when I'm just filming regular, because I use it all the time. Yeah, I switch out to the wide shot and zoom back in, and it does a nice zoom. Whatever Apple's doing, software-wise, to zoom between the two lenses, they're doing a great job, and I really hope the Filmic Pro can do that.
Yeah. Well, if anyone can do it, it's the Filmic team. So they ought to be able to do that. Hopefully they can. And hopefully Apple's made that possible for them.
Yeah, I've requested that online a couple of times. And I keep reminding me every once in a while, a little gentle nudge. Because I would use the iPhone app if it doesn't do it. A lot of times I want that capability. I did a video for a horse rescue back in December. They were transferring their horses from one location to another in Carroll County, and they have a blind herd. They take care of a herd of blind horses. So I went out there with the iPhone, and I filmed them unloading, the horses at the new place and stuff, and getting them used to it. And I was constantly going wide shot to zoom, and I love that feature. So I hope Filmic Pro has that, because nobody else has it yet. You have to stop, switch lens, and then keep on going. Yeah. And I'll be using it at NAB as well.
Great. Well, I think you're going to be excited by what we bring to NAB. But
I'm sure. Absolutely
get in touch with you before then.
So anybody that wants the Final Cut Pro XML export, it's an in-app purchase, $19 and whatever, less than $20.
Exactly. Yeah.
Time.
When you go to export, you'll see the option for XML export there with a little plus sign next to it. When you tap that, it'll give you the option to make the purchase.
Right. So anything else on the 2.2 update that you can think of?
I can't think of anything else. I mean, that's obviously the big one, and there's a number of smaller things. Yeah.
And it seems like mobile journalism is just taken off like crazy. The iPhone 11 Pro has a lot to do with that, but and the iPad in your app.
Mm-hmm. It was bigger in Europe until this year. Now it's really, really starting to take off here. The sort of Mojo movement, or the mobile journalism movement.
Right. I remember years ago, I worked in D.C., and I remember when they let go of like 100 and some professionals like overnight. They said, no, from now on, you're going to be on camera, you're going to do the editing, you're going to do your own audio, you're going to do... And that was years ago. Now it's so much more commonplace to see people doing that. But then they have the specialists. You had the audio guy, the lighting guy, you had the camera, you had the on-screen talent. Now it's all combining into one, for better or worse. But I like it. I've always been like a one-man band, and I just. Yeah.
I think it's it opens it up to a lot of different people all over the world that maybe wouldn't have the opportunity to share their story or share someone else's story. And I think that's the thing that makes me the most proud of being part of the mobile editing post-production movement, is just being able to give that access to people around the world.
Absolutely. I recommend your app all the time.
Thank you.
Especially when people say, when's Final Cut Pro coming to the iPad? I said, it's already here, and it's better than Final Cut Pro. It's better than what they would do with it. Listen, leave the Final Cut Pro team alone, okay? I want them to concentrate on Final Cut Pro for the Mac. Leave it. I got this Mac Pro over here. I don't want them going off and working on an iPad app. They don't. Right here, I got to use this thing. I got 16 cores that are never used. They're just sitting there idle. So I need
an excuse to get one of those Mac Pros. So.
let me tell you, it's by far, leaps and bounds, the best Mac I've ever owned.
Cool.
It is so much. I mean, I was a big fan of the old cheese grater, which I have one downstairs. As a matter of fact, I put a photograph of both of them side by side, the one I have downstairs, and I said, meet your cousin. I put it on Twitter the other day. And I love that one. This one is so much better. It's so much easier to take things in and out of, to pull the case off. It's beautiful. That grid you've seen on the front and the back, the 3D, that's like a 1 inch or maybe a half inch or a 3/4 inch piece of solid aluminum that was molded out, that was carved out.
Wow.
I didn't realize that until somebody pointed it out. It's not like it was, stretched, flat, stamped and stretched. It was solid aluminum. They cut all the holes out. The thing is silent. It's right next to me right now. My microphone's about 2 feet away from it. You can't hear it. It's completely silent.
Nice.
Here's one thing I want to ask you. Do you know of a espresso to lightning port machine?
No.
For the iPad doesn't do that? Because that would be perfect. I can just plug a little espresso machine into the iPad lightning port while I'm editing.
Yeah, that's what I need too.
If you get
I have a hand
exactly.
warmer that plugs into the USB port.
If you get a Mac Pro, talk to me before you get one. There's a couple of things that I recommend. People don't know this, and I didn't know it till I got one. If you don't get the Vega 2 MPX module, there's two of them. There's the single and the dual. The singles, I got the single. If you don't get that, the 2 ports on top, Thunderbolt 3 ports on top, and the 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports in the back will not support displays. That module has to be installed. You can't get the cheap card. The cheap card doesn't activate them. But if you want to use the top for displays or the back 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports for displays, they don't work unless you have that graphics card installed.
Oh, okay.
They didn't tell us that in advance, but it's in the specifications. I got it. I'm glad because I got 8 Thunderbolt 3 ports, and I have I got 8, 2 on the top, 2 on the back.
Do it.
They're almost full. I have RAIDs. I have Thunderbolt RAIDs, and I have one external hard drive, and this camera's connected via Thunderbolt right now, HDMI out to USB to Thunderbolt. So I don't use them all, and I charge up my iPhones and charge up things and stuff. So that's fantastic. I look forward to seeing you all again at NAB in a couple of months.
Great.
Yes.
And
we're excited to see you as well. Yeah,
absolutely.
Is there anything else we want to say before we leave?
Thanks to all the customers, and thanks to you. We really appreciate it.
Luma-touch.com, absolutely. For the website, and then on Twitter, it's LumaTouch, at LumaTouch. And YouTube, you have your own YouTube channel. Photo Joseph is going to bring that red chair to NAB. He promised he would. So people can sit in it and take photographs with it. That's when to sit in the thing. And we look forward to seeing everybody at NAB. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks so much for stopping by. Bye.